Welcome back to the Pesky Report, everybody. Brought to you by Beyond the Monster. Feels like it's been forever since we've been with a regular episode, and excited to be back with you guys today, episode 547. I've got Jordan with me today, and we also are joined by a very special guest. We got Ari Alexander, who's currently with 7 News Boston, sports anchor over there, new to the Boston market, spent some time in the Houston market for quite some time. I believe is a 7-time Emmy Award winner as well. So we have, a distinguished guest with us today, but we're very excited to talk about some of the recent Red Sox news and updates. And Ari, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. Just trying to get used to the cold of Boston and everything the Red Sox fan base has to offer. I've noticed how crazy the fans are so far, so it's been great.
I will say you're probably one of the only insiders that also posts your scoops on the Facebook as well. So I will give you some kudos there for expanding to the Facebook group, because they are typically about 3 weeks behind, and so you're just keeping them up to date. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny how like you don't have to go for speed on Facebook. I found that out. So you do your scoop on Twitter like you're supposed to do, and then I'll go like Instagram second, and then like 3 hours later I'll be like, oh yeah, I should probably throw this on Facebook, and then you're shocked to find how many people are like, oh my God, this happened like 3 hours ago. Yeah, but no, it's good. Facebook I've found that is a much larger platform than people under the age of 50 give it credit for.
It's very true. It's very true. I've recently been doing the same thing, but with Reddit. I found that there's a very large delay in the Reddit community as well. So I found that you can kind of get to that second and reach a large audience there. So
they're more focused on dark stuff over there on Reddit. They're not worried about what's going on in the baseball world.
Yeah. So how's New England been treating you so far? I mean, I guess because you were spending time in Houston, is that where you're originally from, was Houston, or where did you end up coming from and growing up?
So I was born in Ukraine, came to the U.S. 96 when I was 5 years old. Grew up in Iowa, like a real small town in Iowa, but I would spend every summer in Brooklyn. My dad lives there and grandparents all live there, so I'd go to Mets games at Shea Stadium and then Citi Field, obviously, growing up. And then went to University of Missouri, worked in Memphis for a couple of years, worked in Tucson for a few years after that, and then was in Houston for just over 6 years, covering the Astros and kind of the last few of it, the MLB at large, doing some insider stuff. So, it's my first, not my first time in New England. I did play-by-play for the Brewster Whitecaps in 2011 in Cape Cod, so I'm familiar. One of my best friends is from Boston, so I think I spent back-to-back like summer weeks or weekends in Boston, so I'm like a little familiar, but it's definitely been a little different moving from Houston, where it was 80 degrees every day for 9 straight months, to November is when I came here and started, to having to spend most of my money that I've spent here on winter clothes, essentially.
That's quite the culture shift to move in November of all the times, because if you come in the summer, like obviously it's more humid here, but like actually
Houston's way more humid. It's summer.
Okay.
I mean, I've done summer in New England. It's pleasant, but yeah, it's been a little shock where, I drove all the way and it's like you leave home, it's 82 and you get here and it's 18.
Yeah.
It's a bit of brutal winter to move up here too, because it's like especially cold. We've been hitting like, I don't know about necessarily record lows, but like I went to a Celtics game a few weeks ago where I got to Boston and it was like 16, feels like 9. And then by the time I got back to my car, it felt like -7 and I had no feeling in either hand. I don't remember a winter being that cold, and I've been here my whole life.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I'm up in the state of Maine, and a couple of mornings I've been driving to work at negative 15 degrees here in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it's
You win,
you s-
you win.
you go to start your car, and in the car is like, I really don't want to do this today. I'm like, I don't blame
Yeah.
you. But yeah, so we're excited to have you kind of give some Red Sox takes now that you're officially in the market. It's kind of funny because I had seen your name pop up on Twitter before, but obviously not as often as I do now, based on just like the market that you're reporting on. And so when I just started seeing you popping up in November, I don't think I realized that you had switched to the Boston market, but you just started coming in hot with like all these Boston scoops instantly, and we're like, okay, like this is nice, a fresh face in the area with insider information. Like this is cool. So excited to get your takes on some of this news. But I guess I'll ask you just overall, what's been your impression of the Red Sox offseason? And, basically, when you dove in November, did you expect more than what ended up happening? And just kind of give your thoughts on the offseason up to this point.
I think I expected a little bit different. Maybe I thought that they would go a little bit more for power bat than they have. I did expect, I think, and it still surprised me, the amount of activity. Craig Breslow loves to make moves, and so it's a little different than the Astros, where they'll pick their spots. A lot of the frame of the team is sort of done, and then there's a lot of back end stuff, back end 40-man stuff. But you come in around, it was like a couple weeks I think after I started, and they have the arbitration deadline, and it's like trade after trade to get rid of Bernardino, and so it's just like all these little things keep popping up, and so that was something I wasn't used to. I know that he is Breslow as a GM is very active in terms of just looking for all sorts of different ideas. I remember last year, 24 going into the 25 season at winter meetings, just talking to a bunch of different league sources about whoever is doing whatever. And the Red Sox kept popping up on like every player. And so I think I asked someone, I was like, what's up with the Red Sox being on every guy? And they're like, no, they're in on every guy. Like that's the one team that will call and check in on just absolutely everyone. And so I kind of knew back in my mind that they're active, that they're always just kind of looking for stuff and looking for ideas. And the fact that that is going on can get out. And it's kind of no secret that Craig Breslow will make a ton of calls and send a ton of texts and look for just different ways to do various things on improving the club. But then when you get in and it's like week 3 and it's like, okay, they did a DFA. Like, all right, they did one thing and then it's like 3 trades back to back to back. Then you're like, all right, he is as active as you kind of think he is. So that's been interesting. I think in the offseason, they are one of the more interesting teams because they keep doing stuff. The fact that there's a lot of fans obviously a little bit disappointed that they didn't get, the huge names outside of Ranger Suarez or Contreras. But if you go back and you look at what a lot of the other teams did that aren't necessarily like the Mets or the Dodgers that have all this money, or the Blue Jays obviously had a big offseason, but the Yankees didn't do much, or teams like the Guardians are largely a pretty good team every year. They don't do a lot. And so there's just certain teams like the Padres have just late come in and done a bunch of stuff in this last week, but you just don't hear about a lot of teams doing stuff. And some of that I think is a function of the fact that the Red Sox are a premier name team that, massive fan base. But outside of like trading with the Red Sox, did the St. Louis Cardinals do a lot? Like not really. And so you kind of see around the league how many more just count of moves that they make. And so I think that has been sort of interesting. And then the biggest thing noticing for me is has been the fan base reaction. It's Houston has great fans, but I think the Red Sox fans are intense. And so, I grew up with the Mets, and Mets fans are similarly intense. And so it's interesting that every little move of every little name, minor league guys, there's all this info out there. Like the people that do Sox prospects, they have so much knowledge on this. Whereas like with the Astros, I could text a guy about some AA reliever, and me and 2 other people are the only people that know this guy exists. Whereas with the Red Sox, I think there's a vast amount of fans with a deep amount of knowledge of the most random people you've ever heard of. And so you gotta learn. You gotta find. That's one thing when I'm starting, going to get around the players and get around the team more. You have to be a little bit more creative, I think, in finding out some stuff that other people might know versus. I think in other fan bases, like you can get away with some surface level stuff on a AA reliever or whatever.
That's a very funny perspective because most of the reporters that we've had on have kind of come up in this market, so they're used to it. But you're spot on, coming and finding out about Sox prospects and just the depth of research and every single move that because Craig's made so many moves this offseason, every single move is highly critiqued and it's like, okay, well, where's this new guy gonna fall on the Sox prospects top 60? And we got rid of Yoiker Fajardo and most other teams wouldn't even have any idea who, Yoiker Fajardo is. And the Red Sox fans are like, no, we really liked him. And, it's just like the craziest thing. Speaking of Fajardo, actually, I have to tell you, we did kind of predict that he was going to get traded to the Red Sox last offseason as a DSL guy, because we were looking at the names that the White Sox have. And we said that Yoiker Fajardo had a phenomenal name, and that if we were going to trade with the White Sox, that they should just throw in a random reliever, Yoiker Fajardo, and we threw that out there. And then a week later, he was traded. We literally couldn't believe it. The most random.
That's what I'm saying is you got fans over here who have strong opinions about Yoiker Fajardo, and it reminds me of when years ago, I forgot what year it was, maybe 2017. The Mets traded Merandy Gonzalez for Marlins reliever AJ Ramos, and I think I was on my way to dinner, and I was furious, and the whole dinner was ruined because they traded Merandy. I had whatever strong feelings about prospect pitcher Merandy Gonzalez, who did not turn out to be a good player. But I love that amount of intensity from the fan base that people will sit there and spend hours of research on the Yoiker Fajardos of the world and have these intense, strong opinions about these guys. And by the time they come up and are actually big leaguers, they know so much about these dudes. And it keeps me on my game that I got to know my stuff about every prospect and all these back end relievers. And so I think that's great. I think the intensity of the fan base is awesome. And it's a different experience for sure. But I think it does, once we get out to Fenway, I've been there one time for a game, just as a fan. I think it'll be interesting to hear the crowd and see kind of how the people react online to the guys actually in the big leagues.
I am curious because you talked a bit about it with the way the offseason's gone, and it's been different than expected. It's been a busy offseason, but it's not been they didn't get Pete Alonso. They didn't bring back Alex Bregman. Obviously, they didn't pivot to Bo Bichette. So there's been this weird disconnect between what the national perception is of the Red Sox offseason. You see Fangraphs project them to have a top 2 or 3 rotation of the game. I don't know what it is now that the Mets have gotten busy. But do you think it's just because of the fact that they didn't get that big power bat that keeps Red Sox fans so down on the offseason? Because again, the national media is and projection models love this team, but then Red Sox fans are they got so much worse, or they're maybe just as good as they were last season. So I'm curious what your thought is on that disconnect.
I can sort of understand the disconnect because I kind of see it that way as well, where now that I'm here, I sort of understand the fans, the local, perspective of you were struggling to hit bombs in your playoff series. Why aren't you going out and get it? Why aren't you lengthening that lineup? Why don't you have this deep 1 through 9? And you saw the way that the Dodgers won the World Series past couple of years, for front half of that lineup, it's just power bat after power bat. And so I understand it from that perspective, but then you have the back-to-back World Series champs in the Dodgers. And two things that they do really well is having high-end arms, and every player on your roster is a utility guy. And that's something that I see that the Red Sox are doing now. There's 14 infielders that can play multiple positions that they have. They keep signing the Isaiah Kiner-Falefas, and Durbin can play a couple positions, and Monasterio. And so that's a Dodgers model. They, had 10 Chris Taylors, and it worked for a long, long time. And then I was kind of reading about, trying to remember what happened Game 6, Game 7 of the World Series. And from a bullpen standpoint, they're just throwing out starters. Glass now comes in, Yamamoto, and Roki Sasaki, and they're just using these high-end arms. And so it felt like the Red Sox had to pick a spot where there's 3 places that you need to upgrade, and they got 2 of the 3, and it was just sort of impossible to do 3 of the 3. Like, you're not going to massively upgrade your rotation and massively upgrade your floor defensively and have all these utility guys and then also get, these power bats. Because also, where are you going to put them other than you could have had Pete Alonso for money rather than Wilson Contreras? You could conceivably have Kyle Schwarber, but he can't play defense. So what are you going to do there? That's the same problem like the Astros have, where they have like 4 DHs or a bunch of guys that are sort of playing the same position. And so I think that's a problem that the Red Sox have too as well. You have all of these outfielders. You have guys that need to DH. You have Yoshida, who you have to put somewhere or trade him, but then it's going to be difficult to trade him because of the money he makes. And so you're kind of worried about having redundancies on the roster. Whereas if you're built the way the Dodgers sort of have been for years, where they have 6 utility guys, those redundancies go away because everybody can play 4 positions or 3 positions or second, third, and left and be useful in a different way. And so it felt like the Red Sox checked 2 of the 3 boxes. And so if you're a fan, it's just, which of the 3 boxes do you care about the most? And for me, like, I would have loved to see them get a power bat or bring back Alex Bregman, but I understand it from their perspective, where you're building a pitching and defense team, and then you're hoping that 3rd box gets checked based on what you have. 2 years ago, Jarren Duran was absolutely one of the best players in baseball, and his quote-unquote down year was still a 4-5 win season. You have Wilyer Abreu coming up, was on a 30 home run pace and then got hurt. Like, you have guys, Marcel Meyer, massive prospect. Can he tap into power? And so you're betting on guys that you have in your system, on your team, that you've evaluated, that you know more about than everyone else, rather than bringing in an outside bat that you don't have necessarily a full evaluation of.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective too on like the position clustering that's been going on, because they obviously want to value their players to what they are projecting them at. Like, hey, if Jarren Duran stays, we think that he could hit his ceiling again as a 6 to 7 WAR player, as opposed to like the 4.5 that he was last year. And so that's why like none of the trades have been able to go through for Duran, was because everyone's coming out and saying, well, the Red Sox are valuing him like he was, in 2024, as opposed to how he was in 2025 or 2023 or anything like that. And I do think, obviously that should give Red Sox fans some confidence that they believe in their team, but it's frustrating to see it play out and not have the resolution you're looking for, especially. And I think this is where they're really kind of eating their own words. Is the beginning of the offseason, Breslow said, we want a power bat and we want to add home runs. And like, if Breslow didn't come out and say that explicitly, then if it didn't happen, we'd say, well, yeah, you should have known you needed to upgrade that, but like, whatever. But now you can literally go and look at his very first press conference of the year or end of year press conference, whatever it was. And he's like, we need to target power bats, and then we need to get a number 2 starting pitcher, and we need to improve our defense. Like you said, the 3 things. And so they went and not only got a number 2, but they got multiple number 2s, and then they got, Oviedo, which, back end improvement for sure. So they massively improved their rotation, but that wasn't what they said first. It was like, hey, we want a bat. And that's the first thing they said. So I think that's obviously like where they're walking it back now. But I am kind of curious if you heard, because you have your connections in Houston as well. How legitimate were the conversations around the Astros and Paredes? And like, do you think that if the Red Sox had pulled off a trade for Paredes, that would have changed like fans' perspective at that point in the offseason?
Maybe. So I think the conversations were legitimate for sure. I don't think it got ever very close. They were certainly interested in what Isaac Paredes can do. And the Astros had interest in various players on the Red Sox roster. That being said, and I tweeted this out a while back, like, there's interest there, but it doesn't really line up because Jarren Duran for Paredes is not a fair trade. And now if you're the Astros who are trying to win, you have to throw in all this extra stuff to make that a balanced trade. You don't necessarily need Brian Bayo. And then other pieces, like prospects, again, don't necessarily do a whole lot for the Astros, who are a team that is trying to win now. And so you have these specific needs, and they ended up filling like the need that Brian Bayo would have filled for the Astros. They filled with Mike Burrows and Tatsuya Imai. And so they went and did these different things without, it just didn't get done. And so the need that the Red Sox could have filled with a trade got filled in other ways. It's the same thing that happened where a couple years ago, or last year rather, they signed Christian Walker and could have brought back Bregman, but Bregman was taking a while and fielding these offers and going back and forth. So it's like, all right, well, Christian Walker's there, and now he's taken up the $20 million in space that we could have used for Bregman. And so it's one of those things where they're only going to wait for a trade, or they're only going to wait for a free agent for so long before they go to plan B or plan C or plan D. And so it got to a point where nothing was really lining up, and the Astros went on and did stuff that they needed to do, and the Red Sox went on and did stuff that they needed to do, and it just doesn't work out in a way. And so it never felt like that trade lined up very well once, all the rumors came out about it really kind of heating up, quote unquote, but it never felt like they were super aligned on what the framework of the deal could actually be. I think Isaac Paredes would have been a great addition. That being said, he's coming off a pretty bad hamstring injury in the second half of the year. He kind of rushed back to come back very late in the year and was obviously not the same guy and had DH and couldn't really play defense. If you're a team that just got a bunch of ground ball pitchers, he is a below average defender. He had a really nice first half of the year last year on defense, and then it started to trail off. April and May, like he was way better than anyone expected at third base. And I think that you could have made a legitimate argument that he was not much of a drop off from Bregman defensively. And obviously Bregman is phenomenal on defense. And then June, July kind of goes on before he got hurt, and you see the publicly available numbers trail off a little bit. And so it's one of those things where in flashes, he's not bad, but can he keep up a above average glove for 6 months? And the answer is probably not. And so that's where one of those where you're trading the power that you could have gotten. And keep in mind, he's a power bat, but he's a very specific power bat. He only hits home runs to left field, right? And so that's one where I could see the fans could have a little bit of a different evaluation than Breslow in the front office going like, okay, this guy would fit at Fenway, but keep in mind they play 81 road games. And so it's one of those where like in a video game, it makes sense, but in real life, it doesn't quite make as much sense when you line it up. And so again, I like the idea. I know Isak a little bit just from covering him last year. I like the guy as a person. It just didn't feel like a trade lined up the way that it should have lined up.
I feel like that was probably the case in most instances with Duran. And it was something that like occurred to me in like late December, once the Ketel Marte stuff kind of fizzled out. And that was more of a pipe dream from like what seemed like a foregone conclusion for a brief period. Is like, it's difficult because the teams that want Jarren Duran are contenders. They don't really want to make another part of their roster worse to get Jarren Duran. And then no rebuilding team is trading a stud for a guy who's going to be 30 this year. It's just, it's like they almost waited too long, but also like, how do you sell to your fan base? We're going to trade an 8-WAR player that was like 5th in MVP voting in 2024. So it's like, now he's, a DH that will sparsely play the outfield until, further notice. And I don't know. I think in a weird way, it's kind of working out right well for the Red Sox because it's not like Roman got hurt last year. Willier's obviously been injured pretty much his entire big league career. He spent extended periods on the IL. So then you go from moving Duran to the outfield with an injury and Yoshida back to DH instead of plugging Nate Eaton into the outfield. So it's like, to your point earlier about the Dodgers, they are just so loaded with depth that they can just plug and play guys anywhere on the diamond. And if somebody gets hurt, it's like, well, yeah, we've got this all-star that we could just put out there and put somebody else at DH and it works out perfectly.
I think that's the idea too. And like you're the Red Sox, you have money. Or if you're the Dodgers, you have money. Or if you're the Mets, you have money. Like the problem that they're facing right now, where their bench is going to be a backup catcher, probably some sort of backup DH who can't really play the outfield in Yoshida, and then 2 utility guys. It's just, you kind of have to carry it that way based on the money that you spent on Yoshida. And maybe you find a trade. Maybe it's hot in April and some team, needs a bat. Just right now, they have a little bit of redundancies on the roster, but that being said, like almost every team has an imperfect roster that they have to deal with. And if your biggest issue, other than obviously like where are you going to find power in this lineup, in the middle of this lineup, is that you're quibbling about like depth and positional versatility on the bench, like that's not a bad problem to have, knowing that the rotation is set. The back end of your bullpen with Chapman and Whitlock is good. And then beyond that, it's relievers. So you have no idea how good or bad relievers will be, and you'll figure it out throughout the year. And obviously the team has the wherewithal and the depth, prospect depth to add whatever reliever trade you need to do in June or July or whatever. But I think like if your issues are where do we put Yoshida, that's not a bad issue to have.
I know I was looking at the most recent news articles here, and the bigger one that we haven't really talked about is the fact that the Red Sox have acquired Caleb Durbin from the Milwaukee Brewers. That was kind of the need that we ended up going with to fill the second base / third base hole in the lineup. Right-handed hitter, finished third in Rookie of the Year. Ironically, the Red Sox now have 3 of the last 6 people that have finished in third place in Rookie of the Year voting. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, Caleb Durbin, what's your thoughts? I'll go with Jordan first on this one. What's your thoughts on bringing in Caleb Durbin as the offensive / defensive addition that we've been waiting for, I guess?
I don't know. It felt like a weird trade, and you can't really make moves on the basis of another move you made. Like, he's a better version of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to me. Like, he's definitely a better hitter, and he's probably a better fielder at this point, and he's a better base runner at this point, but he's like that similar kind of player where he's not going to hit a whole lot of power. He's going to play a fine defense at multiple positions. But I don't know, like there's the air pull part of his game, which is really enticing to a lot of people. But I just see a guy who's a fine defender, doesn't swing and miss, but there is no punch to his swing. And that's something that can be worked out. Like, I don't want to act like 25-year-old Caleb Durbin is, 31-year-old Caleb Durbin, and it's only going to get worse from here. But I saw the trade happen, and I'm like, I don't know. I like David Hamilton as a defender, and obviously as a base runner, obviously getting on base was a huge problem for him. But like, very good base runner, very good defensive second baseman. I was really high on Drohan, especially with the Red Sox lacking in the bullpen for lefties beyond Chapman, obviously. And then Kyle Harrison, like whatever. I was kind of expecting him to get traded this offseason anyway. It's really only a red flag to people because it was part of the Devers trade. But like overall, it's just like a C+ trade for me. It's with the potential to be kind of as high as a B. He's not going to be great, but I'll never be watching him hit and be like, this guy's playing still. But he's not a needle mover for me, but he raises the floor, which I guess for a lineup that has so much swing and miss, it's something you kind of need, is somebody that's just going to be able to move runners around and, drive in runs when guys are at third and less than 2 outs.
Yeah, I think you nailed it he raises the floor, and this it's not a home run, it's a single. Sometimes you just get guys that you need to fit in certain ways. He can obviously play solid enough defense at third, second if you need him, because you're still trying to figure out how good Marcel Meyer is going to be overall, right? Like, the idea is that he turns into a star player. He's a top 20 overall prospect, but you can't necessarily on March 26th, you can't go, all right, we're relying on you to be a big part of this lineup. I think that getting a Caleb Durbin takes a little weight off of Marcelo's shoulders and maybe off of Roman Anthony, that this guy's played a full season, had a solid year, third in Rookie of the Year, plays some defense, does some things. And I think the one thing you brought up was he doesn't strike out a lot, which could be big just for the length of the lineup. One big reason that the Astros coveted Isaac Paredes is everyone talks about the pull side power and the home runs only to left. Isaac Paredes is one of the longest at bats in all of Major League Baseball. The guy fouls pitches off. He sees the ball well. He's 7-8 pitches every time. And it's like, for pitchers, especially late in games when you get relievers that want to come in and have a 13 pitch inning, grinding out 7-8 pitches with this guy, even if he hits a fly ball for an out to left field, like, it's frustrating. And so I think Durbin is that kind of guy where he's putting the ball in play. And if you're facing the top of, the rotation in some of these teams, the Tarek Skubals of the world that are expecting to come in and strike out 2 and get a 2-pitch ground out. And it's just not going to happen. This guy's going to grind out in at bat, or he's going to put the ball somewhere, and you're forcing the defense to do stuff, especially when you're playing teams that have weaker defenses. Having a guy like that can be useful. And so I think that, and the fact that they didn't really, they gave up Drohan and Harrison, and it's just David Hamilton. None of those guys are the people that you're projecting to rely on in a playoff series. And so I think it's not sexy. There shouldn't be hot takes about it one way or the other, but floor raising the way that you described that, I think, is a good way to describe it. And I think the fact that the guy in his first major league season, seeing the best pitchers in the world, barely struck out, I think is an important skill to have. And that lets some of the other guys in the lineup sell out a little bit more, knowing that, hey, Caleb Durbin's going to put the ball in play.
I know that it gets kind of glossed over too, but I actually really like Andrew Monasterio as well, the utility infielder that was included in the trade. I think that he honestly is very similar to IKF in a lot of ways, and it does make me wonder if they had pulled this trade off prior to signing IKF, if they still would have gone through with that signing, just based on the fact that he kind of fills a lot of those similar utility man, high defensive output type of things. And then Anthony Siegler as well, who's included in that trade, who can play outfield, but also can play catcher as well. Kind of a useful guy to have on the 40-man, like the inverse of Connor Wong, who can't play outfield, but can play catcher in the infield positions there. So, I like the spot. I guess the question that remains at this point with Durbin is, do you guys, and I'll flip it back to you, Ari, here, and I'm curious to know, I think I know where Jordan is on this already, but do you view Durbin as like a number 2 hitter in the lineup, or do you think that he ends up getting slotted down further with like a Trevor Story falling in the number 2?
I would slot him down further. Like, I want punch at the top of my lineup. That being said, if things aren't working, knowing that his skill is hitting the ball in play, you can move him around wherever. And there can be days where you can slot him in number 2 if the top guys are struggling. The Durans, the Anthonys, the Contrerases are having a down week or a down 2 weeks. But I think for me, I want the punch at the top of my lineup. And so I would probably slot him, 7, 8 in that general area. Other than that, but you never know. The guy could find a way, and lineups change. I remember, Jeremy Pena for a while was the 6 hitter, and then they moved him the 2nd spot for the World Series run, and then he was the leadoff hitter last year, switching with Altuve after Altuve had been a leadoff hitter for a long time. And so you can mess around with it and experiment with it. And I think that he has a skill that complements a lot of the other parts of the lineup, and he's a solid defender, which helps. If you're building a team out of a bunch of ground ball pitchers, you need guys like that. And so I think it works. And yeah, Monasterio is another utility guy, just like IKF, another utility guy. One thing real quick about IKF, I had heard, forgot what year he was in the Pirates, the trade deadline was. I don't know if it was last year or the year before.
I think he was traded there in 24 and then re-signed there last year and then got traded again.
So I'd heard the clubhouse loved him. And so you're losing Bregman, who is arguably the best clubhouse guy in the league, or one of the 3 to 5 best clubhouse guys, smartest baseball IQ clubhouse guys in the league. And so that's where IKF, I think, comes in. He was a guy that I had heard the Pirates absolutely loved and would have been upset had they traded him. There was a time before he got moved that it was like, they're probably not going to move him because this clubhouse is going to be pissed if you trade this guy. And then they ended up moving him. But I had heard from a clubhouse standpoint, he's loved.
Yeah, I've heard a few people kind of report that. And so that part, I guess, does make a lot of sense. It's been kind of a signature Craig Breslow move to bring in somebody who's like a clubhouse guy in the offseason with Justin Turner in 2023. 2024 they brought in
Tyler O'Neill was a big clubhouse guy. Yeah. Or turned into one. I don't know if that was the rap sheet on him coming from St. Louis, but he turned into a pretty good clubhouse guy.
Jordan, what You think Durbin belongs at the top of the lineup, yeah?
Yeah, it's just a matter of, like, the way the lineup is, because I think one thing that I'm excited about, even though I've been disappointed with how they've addressed the lineup this offseason, is we get to kinda see the mad scientist that is Alex Cora, kinda operate at the controls of the lineup, and, like, when he has a great lineup, he can kinda do whatever he wants, and it's going to work because he's got, 6, 7, 8 great hitters or good hitters in the lineup. This year, he's got, like, 4, maybe 5 that you can, like, look at and be like, "Yeah, they'll be pretty good." Um, so I think a lineup that is not super deep and a lineup that at least projection models don't see as being an uber powerful lineup, you kind of have to manufacture some chaos. And for me, I would go Roman, Durbin, Duran, and I would have Roman hits a leadoff double. I know Durbin's going to at least move him over to third base because he's not. I mean, maybe not because he pulls in the air a decent amount, but like he's going to put the ball in play. He's going to give you a chance to advance Roman or score him. Story for me, it's like Trev's my favorite guy, favorite player on the Sox. So like, I'm not going to. This is going to be very off brand of me to rag on him, but I just think he's one of the biggest regression candidates in the lineup. And I don't like. I think the AL East is too good to mess around with something that I personally don't have a lot of faith in. Now I'm not in the dugout. I don't have to make that decision, but I think you put Durbin after Roman, you get an early, Roman's one of the best on base guys in baseball. Get him on base. Durbin moves him over, and Duran's actually one of the better, runners in scoring position guys in the league, or at least was last year. I know that his high leverage numbers sucked, but like with runners in scoring position, less than 2 outs, he got the job done, especially against righties. And then Wilson Contreras in the 4 spot is like the biggest like I think of the lineup construction aspect of it. But I think that's how I would do it. And if they do decide to go with Trev in the 2-hole and Durbin hitting 7th, I get it. It's just for me, I would go the contact route following Roman because at least I know that he's going to get moved over. Trev strikes out 30+% of the time. I just worry about that kind of nipping any sort of first inning rally in the bud immediately. And again, what happens in April may not happen in May, but I would personally avoid it. And then if Trev's red hot in June and Durbin's a 90 WRC plus guy, then maybe we can revisit it. But I would open with the contact guy.
Fun Caleb Durbin fact for anyone that's listening that does not know this. He led the league in hit by pitches last year. So crowd that zone. Interesting here, some of the more recent quotes from Sam Kennedy talking about, if Alex Bregman had wanted to be here, he would still be here. I think this was kind of like the more recent news cycle for quotes. And then he went on 310 to left and said, well, sometimes I say things that, people say I say too much. And if I don't say enough, then they say I don't say enough. And so we kind of walked back a little bit of that quote, but it's kind of interesting. And then we had Tom Warner come out and say that there's no such thing as a no trade clause company policy, so to speak, as far as including that. So Ari, I'm curious to know kind of, do you feel like from your time covering the league in general, and then this offseason focusing more on the Red Sox here, do you feel like Sam Kennedy kind of talks himself into these holes deeper than he needs to at some points during the offseason, or like is what he's saying have some fact to it around, if Bregman wanted to be here, he would be here?
So this is sort of my first time really listening to Sam Kennedy because when on the teams that I don't day-to-day cover, I'm more focused on GM, manager, mostly GM, for the transaction type stuff and what I think they're going to do. So I don't have a whole lot of background of what fans think of Sam Kennedy or what his MO or how he talks or anything like that. Same with Tom Werner. So to be honest, I don't know a lot about that. That being said, in my conversations with people close to Bregman, the financial stuff came up before the no trade clause stuff. It just felt like the difference in money with the deferrals was a bigger factor than any sort of no trade. That being said, if I'm Alex Bregman, I absolutely ask for a no trade clause because if he stayed with the Astros, he would have been at 10-5 this year. And so I think that's a deserved thing that someone should throw in. It's like, hey, I left this place that I was forever for a little bit more money. Least you can do is throw in a no trade clause because he's got young kids and wants to stay in one place. He's got the house in Arizona, and obviously the Cubs, have spring training in Arizona, so that ended up being a good fit. And I know that he's got relationships with people in the Cubs organization previously, so it ended up being a good fit. Same with the relationships that he had with people in the Boston organization. But it's I don't love that quote saying if he would have been here, he would be here if he wanted to. I think that if you don't defer as much money, then you could probably or field a little bit more competitive offer. The Cubs outbid the Red Sox for Alex Bregman. That's all it was. There's nothing that they did wrong. It's just they're giving him more money. And if you're a guy that you're weighing two very similar options, two big time teams with massive fan bases, lots of people care, and these iconic franchises. And I think that's something for me that I thought Bregman never outright has said, but I've just sort of believed that he thinks is he's always wanted to play for iconic franchises. The Red Sox are one, the Cubs are one. So when you have these other random teams like the Diamondbacks popped up and it was a fit because he lives there and it's super convenient, but I just don't see 45-year-old Alex Bregman looking at his legacy and being like, I spent 6 years with the Diamondbacks. It's a team that barely has a fan base, right? So I did think that the Yankees of the world, the Red Sox, the Cubs, these big time franchises, I think that mattered to him. But yeah, I think that's kind of an unfair comment that if he wanted to be here, he would raise the money. Then he would be in Boston. It would have been great. So yeah, I didn't like that as much. But again, like my understanding of Sam Kennedy and via the fan base is very low. That's something that I just haven't thought about a lot until I've gotten here.
Yeah, I think Sam Kennedy is one of those guys that like Red Sox fans don't think about until he talks, and then it's like, oh, then we get to because then it's a lot of times it is something like that, or like the quote came out 2 years ago where he called the fan base liars for saying that ownership didn't care when they were talking about Full Throttle and signed Cooper Criswell and Lucas Giolito coming off consecutive 5 ERA seasons, and that was their offseason. Yeah, one thing I was curious about, and you alluded to, some of the conversations you've had with people close to Bregman's camp, and you mentioned the 10-5 thing. Is any part of the desire for a no trade from Boston stem at all from the fact that he just watched them trade Rafael Devers, or is that just me taking, a ridiculous leap?
Yeah, that's nothing that ever came up. So I don't like Devers never really came up in any time I'm texting or calling people about like what's going on with Bregman. I don't think Devers was never really discussed. It was just likes the places. Here's what the financials need to be. The Cubs got to the place. And so similar last year, same thing where there was a number that he wanted from the Astros and the Astros didn't get to the number. It's simple as that. And so like people, you don't have a lot of information. And so people kind of look into it and come up with all these different, ways it could have happened or what would I do if I was a player. And like 98% of the time, like there's some guys where there was one big name player. I'm not going to say who it is, but a big reason that he signed with the team he signed with a few years ago is because they had spring training in a certain location that was near his home. And then there was one player, again, won't say who it was, but he had some family stuff where the wife needed to be close to home. And so he was preferring to sign with a team close to home. And then it didn't end up happening, but it's like a short-term deal. And so it was one of those where he can explain to the family, like, all right, one more year and, we'll figure it out. And so it's a lot of the time, the simplest solution is what it is, which is get to a financial place. And sometimes the secondary ideas are as simple as, I have a house here, so I want to do spring training here, or my wife's family's from here, so I, would rather play at this team. So I think a lot of it is more simple than thinking about whether or not, they got out of Devers. And I think that Bregman and Devers are such different types of players and different types of personalities. This is just not something that I think that he would think about.
Yeah, it is interesting to hear you say, each player has sometimes it's it's most of the time it's about the money, but sometimes about the fit and just like what it makes sense. Like hearing Pete Fairbanks talk about why he, picked the Marlins this year. He's like, no, I didn't even consider the West Coast. He's like, I didn't want to move over there. He's like, absolutely not. So it's just some people have their preferences, and it's sometimes as simple as like, no, I was only going to sign with an East Coast team. Like, kind of crazy how that works out, but um I'm trying to think here because obviously trying to be conscious of time and want to make sure that we hit on a couple of other things as well. What's I'll ask this question to you here, Ari. Do you think that Fanatics is currently holding the Red Sox hostage, and do you think that they will release them at any point before the season starts?
That was pretty funny. I saw the first statement. I was like, oh, the Red Sox made a statement, and then I saw it got deleted on Twitter, and I like didn't even think about the hostage angle. It was like, why did they delete that perfectly like normal statement? Like I didn't read through that. It was like, oh, this is some massive PR mishap. People are going to be pissed. Like it looked like a typical team statement. And then the second statement comes out, and then the addition to the second statement, and it just ends up being sort of a comical situation. And I think that the Red Sox are like Boston seems to be one of, and like I'm not super familiar with Fanatics, right? So like Boston seems to be one of the Fanatics hubs. So I think that Fanatics is probably a little bit more sensitive to the Boston, New York, Philly, little triangle of East Coast big important cities, rather than if like the Guardians pissed him off or something, or the Guardians had some sort of statement about the C wasn't in the right place in Cleveland. I don't see Michael Rubin making the call to the Guardians, and so it feels like this is one of the hubs. And so yeah, I thought that was pretty funny.
Just absolutely the funniest follow-up tweet was like, Fanatics did absolutely nothing wrong. We are so thankful to be working with them. They put out the jerseys to our exact specifications. And it was just like the way it read was like they're being held with like something right up to their head and being forced to type this out. I felt so bad for the admin after that. It's like, they just were having the worst day ever.
PR people have a much more difficult job sometimes than you would think. Same with like the GM. Like I kind of want to mention this earlier. We were talking about the way Craig Breslow talks, and said that they want to do one thing and then the other happened. I think that that's sort of a function of the GM job. And again, like I don't know. I just met Craig at winter meetings, and we had like a very brief conversation, and then I like ran into him at the airport on the way back for 15 seconds or whatever. So I don't know him very well, but it seems very similar to what Dana Brown had to deal with the Astros, where he made these statements to kind of rally the fan base. And so I think the idea comes from a good place of you have this intense fan base that cares, that wants good things to happen. And your intention is to do the things that they want, because that's the path to winning, right? And so like these guys care, and they want to, they want you guys, the fans, to be happy. And sometimes the reality of making those moves doesn't work. And you can't come out every week and go, look, I have been on the phone with the Pirates and the Astros and whatever, and this is just not going to work. And so like that's absurd too. And so sometimes these guys talk themselves into a corner, and it's not like coming from a malicious place. Like I remember like Dana Brown is still getting crushed for one of his first things he said as the Astros new GM is, we have all these great young players. I'm going to extend a bunch of them. And then the only extension he's done is Christian Javier. Like Kyle Tucker got traded and all these other things. And it's just like, the idea is fine. Like it's a good idea. You're rallying the fan base, and then you sort of settle into the reality of the job that you're doing, and what you wanted to happen isn't necessarily the reality. But I think if you are the GM and you come out and you say nothing interesting, then that's not good either. And so it's almost like these guys get put into a corner where it's like, okay, I have to rally, especially like a fan base that cares, right? Like if you're the GM, you're Nick Krall of the Cincinnati Reds, then you don't necessarily have to be, like no shot at the Reds, but like you don't necessarily have to be exciting. They're all going to blame their owner for not spending anyway. So you as the GM don't necessarily need to come out and be like we're going to, sign Ellie Dela Cruz to a $300 million deal. Like, you don't need to do that. But if you're the GM of these high pressure, like, look at what Brian Cashman has to deal with all the time. Like, I don't think Brian Cashman is trying to go out there and look like a fool to his fan base every time that he does or doesn't do something. I think it's coming from a good place. Same with Breslow, same with, Dana Brown or Jed Hoyer, all these guys that are having to deal with an intense fan base. Or with the Mets, like the Mets fans turned on David Stearns in a year. Like, he was the wonderkind, and then in that little month and a half pocket between losing Pete Alonso and trading Nimmo and doing like nothing to them, they loaded up. They wanted his head. Like, this was the smartest human. Like, if you ask Mets fans, this is the smartest human being you've ever met in your life, which it sort of feels like, right? That's the way that Red Sox look at Breslow. This guy is clearly extremely intelligent. And then he does something that fans don't like, and it's like, this guy's too smart for his own good. And so it's like, if you're the GM and you're just dealing with the messaging, like, how are you supposed to win? Because there is, in no world can you deliver absolutely everything you promise unless you have an owner that is willing to just give you unlimited money. And then even then, the Mets have an owner that is willing to give you unlimited money. And there was still a 7-week period where the Mets wanted to catapult David Stearns out of town. So, like, not necessarily trying to defend Breslow, but in the sense of, like, sometimes GMs just get put into a corner with, you have to publicly say something to keep you guys happy. And then if it doesn't happen, it's like, I shouldn't have said that. But like, if you said nothing, it's also not good.
It is a pretty thankless profession. And like you brought up Brian Cashman, that dude's done nothing but win. I mean, he hasn't won rings the entire time he's been with the Yankees, but they're the winningest organization in the sport since he took over there. And Yankees fans want him fired every time they lose 2 in a row. And it's, I definitely hear you there. And I
James Click got non-renewed by the Astros after winning the World Series because him and Jim Crane didn't have a great relationship, weren't on the same page. And so you're trying to answer to the fans, you're trying to answer to the owner, you're trying to deal with the managers. So like, it's one of those things where you get thrown into, like, it is a tough job. Like, these guys are under high pressure all the time. And I'm not necessarily saying like, don't keep the pressure on as fans, but also like a little bit of perspective. Like, there's a million things that you have to deal with all the time. One of them becomes, like, a big one is the messaging of what you're doing. And a lot of these guys are not, like, that's not their thing. It's not like like Brody Van Wagenen, when the Mets hired him as GM, was an agent. Like, he knows how to talk, right? Like, Breslow is not a trained talker. Dana Brown was a scout forever. He's not a trained talker. Like, and then you could hire me to be the GM, but then I don't know how to do all the things that they know how to do, but I can do the messaging a little bit. And then that backfires when I have no idea what I'm doing. And then the moves are a disaster and the team's 72-90. And so, like, it's very hard to find, like, smooth talking, but genius, but knows the stuff. And so GM, very, very high stress job.
Yeah, because I think people get caught up. We saw what happened with the Rangers when they brought in Chris Young. You get the former player, and he turned that franchise from, what they want, like 70 and 92 in 2022, and then won the World Series in 23 by spending half a billion on 2 middle infielders. And it's like, but now you see what the Rangers have done since then, and it's like, well, maybe Chris Young's not as like I said, it's such an unfair position to be in. And it is something that people need to, like, I know you said you're not to defend Craig Breslow, but I think sometimes we need that perspective. We forget how difficult their job actually is, because you're also dealing with the people behind the scenes, like like players' agents and players themselves. And like, not every player, just because they fit your roster to a T, actually wants to play for you, too. So it's like, it takes 2 to tango. And I'm not now I sound like I'm defending Sam Kennedy with the Alex Bregman stuff, but like,
it's just, like, you have to have a little bit of perspective on, like, how many things have to go right for a team to win, and throwing money at the problem doesn't always get it done. Like, that's what the Mets have done for the past few years, and they haven't won anything. They made a shock NLCS, 2 years after they probably should have gone further in 22 than they did in 24, and didn't. And so, like, throwing money at the problem doesn't necessarily always work. Doing all the analytical stuff the way the Rays, and now obviously, 2/3 of the league doesn't always work. And so, or like, you could have a clubhouse where everyone's best friends, but you don't have the talent. And so, Like baseball's hard. So many things have to go right to win a World Series. And even the Dodgers, like everyone complains about the Dodgers, they were within a cat's whisker of losing to the Blue Jays, who no one would have predicted that the Blue Jays would have been in the World Series last year. So it's just one of those things that you got to get lucky a little bit, and you have to have the right mix of the clubhouse chemistry, and then you have to have the talent, and then you also have to have the financial means. And it's like that's why the sport is great and we love it, but it like don't lose sight of the fact that what these people are doing for work is extremely difficult and extremely high pressure, and they're paid for it, absolutely. But it's like it's impressive when they win, and it's frustrating when they lose because they're dealing with this high wire act.
Yeah, I think obviously at the end of the day, like Breslow keeps coming out and saying like you'll be able to see if this was a successful offseason based on how many wins that we achieve. And so, that's something that I think like he does have that perspective where he's like, whether or not I think this was a good offseason or not, it doesn't matter because it comes down to how many games you actually win. And then at that point, we can talk about if it was a successful offseason or not. Which I've heard him say that 2 different off seasons now. So definitely picking up on this is like a trend now here from him. But it's a good perspective because it's very results focused, right? It's like, as hard as the job is, like at the end of the day, it does come down to the actual results that you're getting on the field and how far you go at that point.
I mean, you just have no idea. And like there's all these little things too. Like I'd found out there was one, like I learn a little bit about the players, or there's some guys that you build a relationship with and you sort of know to some degree how they tick, right? And so, like, I remember one time I reported a minor move and then it caused like a guy to get sent down, but then there was like a 1 day delay just because of like there's like an off day or something like that. Or it was like a Sunday going into Monday, and they couldn't bring up the guy until Monday or until Tuesday. But the guy that was getting sent down had to play Monday, but then they couldn't play the guy Monday because he was like in a bad mood because he thought he was getting sent down, and then he ended up getting sent down. And so like there's all these little things that we don't think about it that go into 162, into winning, that like as a fan you would never think of, or even like me as a reporter sometimes like you would never think of. I remember having that conversation. It's like, oh, this guy was in a terrible mood on Monday, and then they couldn't use him to pinch run, and the manager didn't want to use him, and like I'm getting blamed for it, and it's like, how am I supposed to know that like a guy in a different position getting called up on a day delay is going to affect the mood of some other guy who plays another another position that I barely talk to these people. And so it's like there are so many things. And so I think that's a smart perspective for Breslow to have, is go, hey, I did my thing, and the wins will tell you if I'm smart or not. And it's like, because he doesn't know if these moves, he has a model, he has a projection, he has years of experience in baseball of what is his best idea of how to get the team to win within the parameters that he's given. But until you play, you have no idea. No one knows. Blue Jays made the World Series. We wouldn't have thought that. Rangers won in 23. No one would have thought that. Like, it's baseball. Stuff happens. And so I think that, like, at this point, if you're Craig Breslow and you're getting into now several years on the job and you're learning to message, like, hey, maybe I'm going to be right if we win a bunch. And if I'm wrong and we lose a bunch, well, then, you're fair in calling for my head. I think it's like a healthy perspective to have from his end.
Well, I think we probably should wrap this up with just what's are the most intriguing spring training storylines to watch. We got actual games tomorrow. Whether or not it's against a real opponent or not is to be seen. With Northeastern University coming out there and doing their best. But I always do enjoy watching that game every year. Went to spring training a couple of years when I was younger and got to go to like that Northeastern game 2 years in a row, back in 2009, 2010, I believe. No, it was 2010, 2011, because it was the year that they traded for Adrian Gonzalez. But Yeah, that was a great memory, but we actually have games coming up. We've got our first lineup's gonna be tweeted out tomorrow. We've already got pitching probables for the whole week. So, I'll ask you first, Jordan, what's your, you know, at this point in spring training, what's the storyline that's most intriguing to you that you're gonna be watching from here on out?
So it's kind of a two-parter. It's the race for the 5th starter because it seems like a real open competition with like 5 guys in there. So it speaks volumes to the depth the Red Sox have in the pitching staff because they've got Oviedo, Cutter Crawford, and then they still have Tolley and Early. And I feel like I'm missing some. Oh, Patrick Sandoval. So there's 5 guys vying for one spot, and like Sandoval's apparently been like one of the talk of like one of the biggest like eye catchers of spring training. And then second is like I want to see if there's any guys that kind of flourish as like bullpen options. Again, like they didn't do anything with the bullpen this winter. A couple prospects that I think could like make some real noise, even if they're not on a 40 man, is like Jeremy Wu Yelland. I know he's pitching tomorrow. Again, it's against
Mhm.
Northeastern. So like if he strikes out the side on, 9. If he throws an immaculate inning, it means just as much as if he gives up 2 runs, or maybe not just as much. Those guys are like business majors and stuff, um, but it's like I want to see kind of if there are any prospects that emerge where you're like, okay, maybe they find themselves in the mix for a bullpen spot come the end of spring. Because like Drohan was one of the guys I really wanted to watch this camp, and obviously, if I want to do that, I'll have to watch some Brewers spring training, which maybe. But yeah, those are my everything for me is really kind of slanted towards the pitching staff.
At least you're not gonna be able to, try to watch Angel spring training because no one will be. Uh, Ari, what's kind of the most intriguing storyline for you at this point, or did Jordan take kind of all
Yeah,
of
I
them?
got most of it. So I'll give you three. So obviously, 5th starter, and then what you're going to do with the guys that don't necessarily get the spot. I mean, you probably need to go 8 deep, and knowing that Tully and Early are going to be a big part of that. That I think that whoever is not the 6th guy, like you have the 5 and 6, like let's say Oviedo gets the 5 spot. Let's say Crawford is good coming off the injury, and he's the 6, and then Tully and Early is 7, 8, then you can get rid of Sandoval. Or if it's the other way around, like what if you move Cutter Crawford, right? And Sandoval flashes and that's the guy you need. I think it's interesting that Oviedo has options and you can throw him in the minors, but like I don't know. You made a big deal out of trading for him. I like the metrics. I like the fact that he's changed his fastball. I think that he's going to be good. I thought that was a good deal from Breslow and like an intriguing kind of guy that you can turn those metrics into a real. Like he's a horse. He's a big guy. So I kind of like him. Secondly, left-handed relievers. Can Giovanni Moran look good? Who else are you going to get in the left hand? In the relievers, this relief core is not super deep, but the great thing about relievers is they are extremely volatile, and great relievers can come out of absolutely nowhere all the time. And so that's what I'm interested to see. I remember a couple of years ago when the Astros were looking for a high leverage guy and they didn't have a lot of depth. Taylor Scott came out of nowhere and had like a great year because he had a great run in spring training. And so, like, who's that guy for the Red Sox? Is there a guy that we're not thinking about, or an NRI, like a Hobie Harris or whatever, that comes out and is just like lights out in spring training, and then suddenly, like, this is one of your leverage arms? Because that happens every year on every team, that someone that you have never heard of or barely cared about, especially in the relief core, comes out and turns into a nice player. And then third is Marcelo Meyer and Christian Campbell. Can your high ceiling, big time prospects show that they need to be in the lineup in some form for the Red Sox? Because if you hit on your prospects like you were supposed to, with the rest of the lineup that they have, if Roman Anthony continues to be what he is supposed to be, and then Campbell turns into what he is supposed to be, and Meyer turns into what he is supposed to be, now you're looking at a deep lineup. And so I think that those are the three big things that I'm watching. Lefty reliever, 5th spot, and who you trade if they don't make that top 8 and the starting pitching, and then can your big time prospects flash?
Yeah, I like that last one a lot. I was gonna say my storyline to watch was Christian Campbell related. Like, we're gonna see a lot of run of him starting basically March 1st when the entire outfield core goes to play in the WBC, and they're going to be supposedly giving him a lot of reps in the outfield during spring training. So be interesting to get a lot of Christian Campbell at bats, and see him play more on a frequent basis in potentially the same position more than one game in a row. That remains to be seen. So don't hold me to that, but that's I would imagine the plan, especially since they really don't have that many outfielders projected to be in big league camp come, March 1st at that point. So
For a second, I thought you were
that's
making a joke and you were saying that the Red Sox don't have any outfielders, and I'm like, "What?"
well, we're sending them all to play for their country, so
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
won't have any more. But um yeah, that's gonna be the storylines there, and then I guess this is kind of, an overarching storyline, not necessarily spring training related, but I am very excited for the WBC and watching the, games take place. Especially excited to see Roman Anthony getting a chance to represent Team USA along with Garrett Whitlock, and, just putting things into perspective. I know a lot of fans are freaking out about his injury risk, or anyone that's playing in the WBC. They always are like, "Oh, what if he gets hurt again? What if anyone gets hurt?" And you got to remember, like, they're only playing 7 games, roughly, I believe it is. So, like, this is not a huge risk at the end of the day. And secondly, like, this will probably be the only time that Aaron Judge and Roman Anthony are on a team together. And, like, you think about everyone else on that team, you got Alex Bregman, you got, like, just star after star after star on this team, and I think it could be the best USA team we've ever seen. I think I'll ask your guys' perspective on this, but um, for Roman, I think it's really exciting to see him be able to talk and just play and compete and share a locker room with these guys more than just like an all-star game down the road or something like that. So that's kind of a storyline I'm very excited to watch. Um, and I'm also excited to see like so many of our guys going to play for Venezuela. I think that'll be really cool to see. I'm sure that'll be bonding as well for them, especially where it's, Suarez, Contreras, and Abreu, who have that never played together up to this point, coming together playing for Venezuela. So that I am excited for. Ari, are you going to be attending any of the WBC or following that on your end?
I'll watch, but no, probably not be attending. I got a little vacation coming up in early March, and then after that, time to lock in on Celtics and Bruins, and then what the Red Sox are going to do once everyone kind of comes back from WBC. Then it's that little 2-3 day period where you're trying to figure out like who's going to make the team. Are they going to flip some guys who don't make the team? And so that's where I get in and start hassling people, making a lot of calls, making a lot of texts, and like, hey, is this guy making it? Is that guy making it? What's going on with this? So that'll be interesting to me, as well as following obviously a potential Celtics Eastern Conference title is what I believe could happen. I am not scared of the Knicks or the Pistons, and then hockey is very unpredictable in the playoffs, so you never know. If Swamming gets hot, maybe the Bruins make a run. So that'd be nice to see I would love to see a all 4 sport championship run with, going to the Super Bowl. My 3rd month of work was pretty nice. So
Yeah.
let's see a Celtics NBA Finals and a Stanley Cup run from the Bruins, and then we can cap it off with a World Series run for the Red Sox. Would be a nice first year here.
Was that your first Super Bowl that you've been to, or had you been before?
No, so I went in I worked at an NBC affiliate, and typically, the affiliates around the country will go. So 2020, the year that Mahomes won his first, was there like Wednesday through Sunday, but that was the first time that I've gone covering the team that I cover, and also was there for the whole week leading up and actually like doing the pressers with the team that you cover and just all that kind of lead up. So it was definitely it was a little different than doing Radio Row every day, which I've done Radio Row. I was there last year just because it wasn't far from New Orleans and felt like it was a good idea to pick off some guys for interviews. Like I grabbed Bijan Robinson for like a fun acting thing because he wants to be an actor after the NFL. So but yeah, it was the first time I've gone like covering the team that I cover. So that was interesting and obviously a little different, but they're ahead of schedule. You hope that you get Tatum back and they're, a powerhouse in the East like they can be. Bruins we'll see. And then obviously the Red Sox are in a massively difficult division. But the Blue Jays kind of surprisingly came out of it last year. So why not? Especially when you have the high end pitching, you win a bunch of games 3-1, you still win those games.
As Kevin Millar famously said, "Why not us?"
Yeah.
Jordan actually co-hosts on our stream, but it's a Celtics podcast as well. So he's definitely in the weeds with it. I think you just recorded last night, right, Jordan?
Yep. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. First time in 2 weeks because of the All-Star break. So, yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, we appreciate your time hopping on, Ari, and don't want to take up anything else here from you this evening. Appreciate you being flexible with us. But is there anything you want to plug for yourself, any projects, or where people can find you on social media or online?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So you can find me on Twitter at Ari A1Xander. So I tried for Ari Alexander, but it's a guy in Indonesia and he wanted $600 for the handle. So that deal did not get done. Sometimes deals don't get done, right? I'm like GM. So it's Ari A1Xander with the number 1 is the L and Alexander. Same on Instagram, same on TikTok, and it's just Ari Alexander on Facebook since we talked about Facebook. So that would be, it's not hard to find, and excited to meet the fan base as we get out to more Red Sox stuff at Fenway, which has always, even though I grew up going to Mets games, Fenway's always been my favorite ballpark just because a mix of the history and how strange it is. The mix of this is called the Pesky Report. Like I love the Pesky poll because of just how the sight line is so bizarre versus every other ballpark in baseball. And then obviously with the green monster in the left. And so I love that it's a throwback to an era where they built stadiums based on the surrounding area and not just like a large metal and glass box based on, everything has to look uniform. So I've always loved Fenway for that reason. And the fact that this will be my home ballpark to work at for covering baseball is something I'm really excited about.
Well, we are definitely excited to have you in the market, and I'll ask Jordan if he has any final thoughts here. But I'll leave you with one thing to research after this. If you're going to be in the Boston market, you gotta research the grip check, and
Yes.
so that's I'm going to leave you with that.
All right.
Jordan, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, really curious. I've meant to bring this up during the storylines. I don't think he's probably not going to make the opening day roster, but really curious how Tristan Casas is going to look and how much game action he actually gets into in camp. I mean, we saw last year with Yoshida, just because you play in spring training doesn't mean you're anywhere close to actually playing a Major League Baseball game. But he's moving pretty good. And I don't know if he's moving full tilt at this point in his rehab, but he looks like he's trimmed down a little bit. He's moving a lot better than he did last year before before his knee exploded. And then I'm still convinced there was nothing in that damn box that got that video that got posted of him yesterday. So yeah, very, very curious to see how Tristan looks in camp.
That would be very Tristan Casas to carry an empty cardboard box just because he knows. Yeah. The one time he doesn't cover his face is when he wants it. He definitely wanted to be seen. So very funny. All right. Well, we appreciate, again, your time, Ari. On behalf of Jordan, Beyond the Monster, and the Pesky Report, thank you guys for tuning in. Excited for some actual baseball. Next time that we get together, we will have baseball to talk about. If you want to go back and listen to the episode before this and listen to the minor league guys who interviewed Stanley Tucker, great interview, really, really nice guy, and looking to have a bounce back year from him this year after he missed all of last year with an injury and tore it up a little bit in the Arizona Fall League. So, as always, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Pesky Report. And until next time, we will see you later.